All right, and welcome back to the First Team Fantasy Podcast. Got myself Schiff and Derek here, and going into a game that I know laments Derek quite a bit to talk about. But starting off with the Steelers, heading into Las Vegas to take on the Raiders, ended up winning 32 to 13.
Mm-hmm.
They were favored by 3. The over/under was 36 and a half. Clearly overachieved that.
Yeah.
But I mean, this one was another one where you saw the Raiders start with the lead, and then, I mean, it's going to take a bit for them to form a new offensive identity. Um, we actually got quite a bit to talk about concerning this team in a later episode. But as for the Steelers, Justin Fields was okay in the passing game, 14 for 24 for 145 yards. It was on the ground where he really made a statement. He had 11 rushing attempts for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns, giving him 23.7 points and putting him as the quarterback 7 on the week.
Yep.
So the thing about that is it would be nice to say he'd be a streaming option moving forward. But it looks like the Steelers are making the pivot now in week 7 to Russell Wilson as the starter,
Yep.
despite Justin Fields starting 4 and 2. Looks like they're still going to make that change. So it'll be interesting to see how things are for the Steelers offense moving forward, how things change with George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, so on and so forth. But as for Najee, he put up his best game of the season by far, his first 100-yard game. 14 attempts for 106 and a touchdown, also added 2 receptions on 2 targets for 16 yards, giving him 20.2 points. Wonderful day for him, and only did it on 46% of the snaps.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we did see Jalen Warren come back in this one, play 37% of the snaps, kind of get worked back in. He ran the ball 6 times, only for 7 yards, so not too much, but added 3 receptions on 3 targets for 11 yards, which is one thing that will unfortunately, I mean, whether he becomes a standalone fantasy asset, he will eat into Najee's passing work as long as he is there and healthy.
Yeah.
Um, Jonathan Ward also played 9% of the snaps, added 3 carries for 13 yards, just kind of in garbage time. But George Pickens, 8 targets, only caught 3 of them for 53 yards, giving him 8.3 points. And then Calvin Austin had 2 catches for 2 catches on 5 targets for 36 yards. So 5.6 for him. Freiermuth had a touchdown called back in this one, but if he would have got that, it would have been a nice day. He didn't. Ended with 2 catches on 3 targets for 16 yards, so 3.6 for him. 17 points though for Chris Boswell, who has been doing quite well. And then the Steelers defense gave you 15 points.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of surprised to see him make the QB change. I'd like to say Russ is going to bring more for Pickens and Firemouth. I'd like to say that, but we'll see. I am interested. Pickens has been pretty heavily underperforming this season to date. And the Raiders side of the ball, the tough part covering them right now is you really just had Madison and Bowers in this one that we even consider fantasy wise. I guess Trey Tucker, you're looking to see what he would do in this one, but it was just an ugly game. It was Aiden O'Connell starting instead of Baker Mayfield,
Mm-mm.
instead of Gardner Minshew. I'm all over the place. It was Aiden O'Connell in this one. And I mean, you look at his stats and you're like, he had a decent day, but it just was not there for this offense. Aiden was 27 for 40, 227 yards, a touchdown, a pick. Gave him 12.08 fantasy points. Madison, a guy that I liked to start for strictly for his passing volume. He still was not efficient on the ground. He did see 14 carries for 33 yards, but did get in the end zone and caught all 5 of his targets for 32 yards, giving him 17.5. And he's playing a majority of the snaps with Zamir White missing again. He played 68% of snaps. Amir Abdullah played 30%. He carried it 4 times for 24, caught 3 of his 5 targets for 14. It gave him 4.8. It just, I mean, because he fumbled. It's just, it was a bad day for the Raiders. Trey Tucker, who I was hoping for, because Devontae no longer with the team, but did not play in this one. Neither did Jacoby Myers. So you're looking at Trey Tucker to hopefully do something for us. He played 95% of the snaps, was only targeted twice, did not come down with a catch. So I don't think he's going to be a reliable fantasy option week in and week out. I was hoping he could be a flex, kind of a deep ball player, and he just is not living up to that as of current at the least. We saw DJ Turner. He finished with 5.7. Christian Wilkerson finished with 9.8. He caught the lone touchdown. I'm not even going to get into their exact stats. Like, they each had 2 catches, but these aren't guys we're even considering picking up in fantasy. And once Jacoby comes back, it's just, no, we're just not looking at him. Brock Bowers, on the other hand, is the lone bright spot in this Raiders pass-catching offense. He was great again in this one. Caught 9 of his 10 targets for 71 yards, giving him 16.1. And we actually saw Harrison Bryant catch the second most passes from a receiver or tight end. He caught 3 of his 5 for 24, giving him 5.4. This Raiders offense does not look good. It's really, at this point, Bowers. We're going to see what Jacoby Myers does operating as the wide receiver 1. He should obviously be rostered. And then when Zamir White comes back, I don't know what it's going to look like between him and Madison. Madison's obviously been better. He offers more out of the pass catching out of the backfield. But I just don't know what the involvement will look like. I think Madison has a higher value right now than Zamir. But we'll see going forward. It was just an ugly one for the Raiders side of the ball. And to be fair, this
Cam Akers got traded to the Vikings.
Like, all right. I guess writing was on the wall. He only played like 1 snap this past week with Dameon Pierce coming back.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Anyway.
I don't think it'll affect Aaron Jones. More so, Ty Chandler might get bitten into a little bit.
Adams plans to play weeks.
Of course he does.
Yeah, I knew that hamstring wasn't a real thing, but anyways.
Yeah, our next game was a divisional game. The Chargers going into Denver and beating the Broncos 23-16. And realistically, it was right around how I would expect this game to go. Justin Herbert actually threw the ball 34 times. I was surprised to see that. He was 21 of 34 for 237 yards and a touchdown. Did not throw an interception. Finished with 13.7 fantasy points. He's a great quarterback, but his fantasy relevance is just not there and will not be there this season. J.K. Dobbins, on the other hand, Gus Edwards now on the IR. So J.K., I don't want to say he's getting more work because he was already the workhorse, but, now he doesn't even have Gus to compete with him. He saw 25 carries for 96 yards and a touchdown. Caught both of his targets for 6 yards, giving him 18.2. He was the high-scoring player for the Chargers, and he had a great week. And the rookie stepped in as the RB2 here, Kamani Vidal. I don't think on the podcast, but we talked about him, his potential role in this offense, especially, with the injury history of JK and Gus Edwards, what his role would be. Well, he got some work in this one. He was inefficient on the ground, carrying it 4 times for 11 yards, but caught both of his targets for 40 yards and a touchdown. So he finished with 13.1. I think he's going to serve as the RB2 going forward, at least until Gus comes back. I don't necessarily think he's going to hold a great fantasy value during that time, but if you have Dobbins and you potentially want the handcuff, Vidal is going to be involved to an extent. He has shown he can catch it out of the backfield. We'll talk about it more on the waiver episode, but, a solid NFL debut for him. Lad McConkey, the Chargers had a couple injuries through in their receiving room. Lad McConkey dealt with an undisclosed injury. He left for a brief period and then returned to this one. He saw 8 targets, catching 4 of them for 43, giving him 8.3. Quentin Johnston also left with an ankle injury and returned in this one. He saw 4 targets, catching 3 of them for 22. He only played 41% of the snaps. Lad McConkey played 63. Just to give you an idea, they did miss time. Quentin Johnston more. So Quentin Johnston with a 5.2 performance. I mean, a bit of a letdown, but they did play the Broncos, who have a good secondary, a good defense, to be fair, this season. So it is what it is. Josh Palmer, I saw he's still rostered in like 18% of leagues on Sleeper. Why? Who is rostering
There's
Josh Palmer?
because there's a decent amount of like 32-man leagues
It,
and so on and so forth. So it's like you can't really afford to.
it's gotta be those leagues too, because I'm like, dude, he's out there. He played 55% of snaps, caught 2 of his 3 targets for 38, giving him 5.8. Simi Fahoko finished with 6.4 fantasy points, and Will Disley, who never goose eggs you but never does great, caught 4 of his 5 for 26, giving him 6.6. Cameron Dicker had a solid day with 12, and the defense, worth mentioning because they were a solid option to play this week. They finished with 8, so a decent outing from them.
On to the Broncos, huh? I mean, they only put up 16 points, but honestly, there was a lot more fantasy goodness than you would expect, and a lot of it came later in the game. I'm pretty sure the Broncos only had like, or Bo Nix only had like 27 passing yards, or some crazy stat going into the fourth quarter, but we don't care about garbage time in fantasy football. We encourage the garbage time stats
Yep.
unless they're coming against you, then it sucks. But, Bo Nix put up a great fantasy day, honestly, in this one. He
Yeah.
did so well that let me go back to the week 6 stats because he finished as the QB. There we are. Bo Nix finishes the QB9 on the week,
Yeah.
which, I mean, is currently sitting at the QB13. And I mean, granted, the start was a bit rough, and then he had a decent game against Tampa Bay, stinker against the Jets, the last 2 against the Raiders and Chargers, 23.14, 21.74.
Yeah.
His next game is against New Orleans, but then he gets Carolina, Baltimore, who hasn't been great against the pass,
Yeah.
then Kansas City, Atlanta, the Raiders again. I mean, I think Bo Nix is a decent streaming option at this point. Another thing to note in this game, I mean, he was 19 for 33, 216 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, but he ran the ball 6 times for 61 yards.
Yep.
I mean, this is what I like about Bo Nix. Um, I mean, the last 2 games, 8 attempts for 9 yards, but the rushing touchdown,
Yep.
and then 5 attempts for 3 yards. The game before that, 9 attempts, 47 yards, and a rushing touchdown. 4 attempts, 25 yards the game before that. His very first game, 5 attempts for 35 and a touchdown. So he is willing to run the ball. It looks like they'll draw up plays for him to run the ball. He's very athletic and good at it. He was good in college. I mean, and it carried over. So I think he's definitely a good streaming option. Yeah, he has the ability to throw the ball, and it looks like some of the receivers are starting to come on a bit. But just the fact that he will run the ball like that, and he'll vulture touchdowns at the goal line.
Yeah.
I mean, he is becoming a very decent streaming option. Good, may I say. Javonte Williams, just as he was tricking people, this is why I traded him away. But just as he was tricking people into trusting him again, 6 attempts for 23 yards, caught 3 of his 6 targets for 13, but lost a fumble, so he finished with 4.6 points. He played 67% of the snaps, only 25% to McLaughlin, and 4% to Audric Estime, who returned in this game and got 2 attempts for 13 yards. Not great, but 3 attempts for 8 yards for McLaughlin. I mean, he's probably he's good enough between the tackles that he's going to earn himself a role, which is going to further muddle this backfield.
Yeah.
So, for fantasy purposes, I'm like I said before, kind of trying to stay away from it, especially as it gets harder to figure out. McLaughlin did add 2 receptions on his 2 targets for 17 yards, giving him 4.5 points. So, I mean, nothing too great out of the Denver backfield. Devon Vele, in his first game back,
Mm-hmm.
plays 62% of the snaps and gets 6 targets, catches 4 of them for 78 yards, 11.8 points. I mean, in the first game, he did well when he played. He comes back, gets 6 targets, ties Cortland Sutton for the most on the team, and Javonte Williams. And I mean, he catches 4 of them for 70.
Yeah.
I hate to say, like, unfortunately, but kind of unfortunately, he is a guy that you kind of have to take a look at.
Yeah.
Kind of like Demario Douglas, someone we'll talk about later in our waiver episode. But these are guys that if they're going to be on the field and they're going to get targets and come through, then I mean, I don't know, they're worth taking a look at the very least. Um, and Cortland Sutton also, like I said, got 6 targets, caught 4 of them as well for 53, also a touchdown. So he got 15.3 points, came through in this one. Troy Franklin also came through with a touchdown.
Yeah.
Got 3 targets, caught 2 of them for 31, and that touchdown. Also had 1 rushing attempt for 5 yards, so he finished with 11.6 points. And then their tight end room is so weird, but it seems like Lucas Kroll is kind of taking over.
Mm-hmm.
He was I mean, Nate Adkins, uh, I think actually, let me check. He might have gotten a target.
Yeah, you got to catch 1 for 5.
Okay, there's a reason why I didn't add it in. I was like, I'm pretty sure he had some involvement. But I mean, Adam Troutman is not the guy. It's apparently Lucas Kroll, who caught 2 of his 4 targets for 11 yards. Not saying it's going to mean anything, but I don't know. It might be something to keep an eye on down the line in case you lose a tight end and there happen to be no more.
Yeah.
Will Lutz added 5 points. Denver defense added 4. Not the greatest for their defense or special teams this week. But if you don't have anything to add to Denver,
No.
then it's on to the next one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in this next one, the Falcons went into Carolina to take on the Panthers. And I mean, what we thought was going to happen happened. It's nice to see, though, that when the Panthers are on the other end of lopsided games, they're still able to put up, like in this one, the 20 points. Lost
Yeah.
38-20, but it's like, number one, they're scoring enough so that the other team still has to
Go.
do something. They
Yeah.
can't just be stagnant, or the Panthers will continue to score. And it's nice for the Panthers because they're always having to throw the ball, playing catch up. And even through that, I mean, you'll talk about Chuba, he's still been great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so onto the Falcons side of the ball though, where like I said, they won 38-20, so as you can imagine, they did a lot of running the ball in this one, which they did. Kirk did throw the ball 30 times, 19 for 30 for 225 and 1 touchdown. Had 4 rushing attempts for -5 yard, pretty much kneel downs, but
Yeah.
12.5 points out of him. And it's like kind of a dud, but it wasn't a bad game, like real football wise. They just handily beat their opponent and were able to run the ball quite a bit. I mean, 33 attempts between Bijan and Tyler Algier.
Yeah.
Um, Bijan, 15 for 95 and 2 touchdowns, also added 3 receptions on 4 targets for 10 yards. So 25.5 points for him. something that people who drafted Bijan have been desperately waiting for. I
Yeah.
mean, he hasn't been bad like we talked about, but he hasn't been putting up top 3 pick, like top 5
Yeah.
pick. No, and that was kind of the issue. But with this, it's like you can breathe a little easier. This is what we not what we can expect every week, but to see that this is within the cards is nice.
Yeah.
Um, Crazily enough, Tyler Algier also had a monster game. He had 18 rush attempts for 105 yards and a touchdown. Also caught his lone target for 3 yards, giving him 17.8 points. I mean, there might have been some people who just started Bijan or started Tyler Algier like in the flex, hearing the news about Bijan's I think it was a hamstring, just like it was
Mm-hmm.
concerns of a hamstring going into the game. So there are people who might have just played Algier like, this is a game that the Falcons are probably going to win. They might get up big, run the ball a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, the process for playing Algier was perfectly there in this one. Like it wasn't shot in the dark is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So if you played Algier this week, you definitely saw the rewards for that.
For sure.
Um, the way their snaps split up, Bijan played 56% of the snaps and Algier played 41, which is more than usual, but probably had a bit to do with, like I said, the Falcons getting that big lead. Bijan wasn't necessarily 100%, still
Mm-hmm.
good enough to score 2 touchdowns, put up 95 yards. But as far as the pass catchers, it wasn't so lopsided that no one had a good day. Drake London caught 6 of his 10 targets for 74 and a touchdown, so 19.4 for him. He is a guy that we talked about, and every week, like he is one of the safest options at as your wide receiver one right now. Like as
Yeah.
crazy as that seems, he is currently sitting at the let's see. Well, on the week he was the wide receiver 15. There were a lot of pretty good wide receiver performances this week. But on the year, Drake London is sitting at wide receiver 5.
Yeah, he's been good. Really good.
Yeah, so going where he did in the second round, I mean, a lot of times behind Puka, you're definitely liking what you're getting out of him.
Yeah.
Darnell Mooney kind of took a back seat in this one. Had 5 targets, caught 3 of them for 38 yards, 6.8 points. I am not remotely concerned with the Darnell Mooney performance. He was still out on the field 96% of the snaps. I mean, it wasn't a
Yeah.
competitive game. In games that are competitive, he will be a lot more involved. And it's encouraging to see him out there all of the time, regardless of, the stat sheet didn't look that great this time. I started him, wasn't happy with the performance, but still, I mean, CD Lamb is on bye this coming week. Still going to be using him this coming week.
Yeah.
So Ray McLeod had 3 catches also, but on 4 targets for 30 yards. Also ran the ball once for 3 yards and lost 1 fumble, so he finished with 4.3 points. And then Kyle Pitts, especially for a tight end, but for Kyle Pitts himself, this was a
Hmm.
pretty great day. 3 catches on 5 targets for 70 yards, so he gave you 10 points, which is honestly like I'll take that, especially from him. Young Wei added 12, and then the Falcons defense gave you 7 if you happen to start them.
Yeah. No, it was some good outputs from the Falcons, and I mean, on the Panthers side of the ball, our two guys that we would start this week also performed well. Andy Dalton was able to get it done to an extent. He was 26 of 38, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Did you see Mark Sanchez praising Andy Dalton? If you didn't see the
Mm-mm.
clip, so it's like late in the game, and Mark Sanchez is like, it's a good thing Bryce Young has like a vet like Andy Dalton that, he can sit back and really learn from. As he's saying that, Andy Dalton throws a pick. It's
Mm.
just like, of course. But Andy Dalton's been solid. If for whatever reason you started him, you're in a deep league, whatever the case is, he did give you 16.9, just about 17 fantasy points. So it wasn't a bad week for him. His pass catchers, Deontay, again, another great week for him. 10 targets, catching 6 for 78 and a touchdown, giving him 19.8. Xavier Legette also found the end zone on three catches for 23 yards on 4 targets. So he finished with 11.3. And it is
That was
worth.
encouraging.
Yeah. I mean, it was 4 targets. He was limited on yards, but he is a red zone threat, and they did find him. Very encouraging there. Jalen Coker is kind of in a battle with Mingo for that number 3 receiver, and right now it looks like Coker may be getting the nod. He caught all 3 of his targets for 30, giving him 6. And Jatavian Sanders was targeted 7 times, catching 5 of them for 49, giving you 9.9. And the guy
He's their
himself,
rookie wide receiver or rookie tight end out of Texas.
correct. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a rookie. Jalen Coker's a rookie. Like, I mean, they have some young receivers that are showing promise. It's going to be, I mean, I just hope Bryce Young. Fantasy wise, you should not want Bryce Young to return. You assume it will be a bit of a down spike. And the biggest, if you have Jonathan Brooks and you are wanting him back, the biggest hurdle he is going to have to climb over is Chuba Hubbard deciding this season that he is just going to run the ball as efficiently as possible. And he continued it in this one. That's double digits every week except week 1, where he was awful and it seemed like he was just not going to be good. And in this one, he carried it 18 times for 92 yards, caught 5 of his
I hope
6
he gets
targets.
traded.
Uh, and he might, like,
That'd be so nice.
yeah.
Cowboys need a running back.
Yeah. But, yeah, 5 catches for 11 yards. He finishes with 15.3. He has been as solid as the running back position comes. He's currently the RB5. And that's despite scoring 1.4 fantasy points week 1. So he has been fantastic for them. He played 82% of snaps. Miles Sanders has disappeared into the abyss completely. And I think when Jonathan Brooks gets his footing and gets back, it's going to be Miles Sanders just fading into nothingness. He carried it 3 times for a single yard and caught his lone target for 12 yards, giving him 2.3. He's just not involved in this one. And I mean, rightfully so. Chuba's been running it extremely efficiently. That would be an interesting trade to the Cowboys. I have to circle back to that. That would be good for both teams, realistically. And speaking of the Cowboys, they got absolutely destroyed on Jerry Jones's birthday in Dallas. 47-9 to the Lions. I did not care to look up the lineman stats from the Lions in this one, but even the linemen for the Lions were getting in on this beatdown. It was painful to see for Cowboys fans. 47-9. Jared Goff cruised in this one. 18 completions on 25 attempts for 315 yards and 3 touchdowns. Carried it 3 times for 5 yards, giving him 25.1. Jared Goff, it seems like he's finally catching rhythm. Early in the season, it's not like he was playing bad or the Lions were playing bad. Their game script still was in this one, but will always be heavily around the run. And if the run is working, they're going to stick with that. When you have David Montgomery that can almost always punch it in from the goal line, it takes touchdowns that either Jameer or potentially Goff would get through the air. That'll just be the case through the season. David Montgomery played 31% of snaps, carried it 12 times for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns, caught his lone target for 0 yards, but gives you 21 fantasy points on 31% of snaps. He didn't really have to put wear and tear on, and he gave you 21. So another great week for him. Jahmyr Gibbs was solid as well. 12 carries for 63 yards, caught 3 of his 5 targets for 28, gave you 12.1. He played 54% of snaps. Again, David Montgomery sniping those touchdowns, he just got extended. This is not going away. It is going to be here to stay for at least the next couple years. So we just
I think it
have to
might
get used
hurt
to
like
it.
the dynasty outlook of Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit because
Yeah.
the hope was that David Montgomery was going to sign elsewhere and it was going to be Jahmyr's backfield to take over, but for the next 2 years at the very least, that will not be the case.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, there was multiple receivers. It was solid weeks around for all the pass catchers. Amon Ra was only targeted 4 times, caught them all for 37 and a touchdown. He gave you 13.7. Jamison Williams was targeted 4 times, catching 3 for 76 and a touchdown. I don't know why I didn't write down his total, but it was 17.7, so he had a great week. And then you get deep, like Khalif Raymond gave you 11.3, Tim Patrick gave you 9.8. These aren't guys I'm going out of my way to look at fantasy wise. Like Khalif Raymond had 4 catches on the season coming into this week. Tim Patrick, obviously coming off multiple injuries, he's just not guys we're going to consider fantasy. Sam Laporta is someone I am like incredibly concerned with. I know this was his first double digit performance. He caught a 52-yard touchdown. So he finishes with 12.2 because not only was that his only catch, it was his only target.
Yeah,
He
do you want to hear something crazy?
Go ahead.
So last year, I think he had it's like 122 targets.
Yeah.
120, 122. This year, guess how many targets he's on pace for?
60.
51.
Yeah. It makes no sense. Nothing necessarily changed. They lost Josh Reynolds, who was the wide receiver too. Jamison
I
Williams
think
stepped up
it's
to
just
it.
I think that's it. It's just the Jamison Williams ascendance, and they just don't need
Yeah.
like Sam Laporta the same as they did last year.
Yeah. No, it's valid, but it is incredible. He's currently the tight end
It's unfortunate,
17,
honestly.
and he was being drafted as either the tight end 1 or 2. He just has not performed how we would like, but he got it done fantasy wise this week. But again, 1 target is scary. He's not going to catch a 52-yard touchdown every game. It's just, we'll see. But outside of that, the kicker, Jake Bates, gave you 19, and the Lions defense, I don't think people were starting them, but if you did, kudos to you. They gave you 20 fantasy points. A great week for the Lions.
Yeah. Not so great a week for the Dallas Cowboys, who were only able to put up 9 points in this one, clearly all off the leg of Brandon Aubrey.
Yeah.
If you started Dak Prescott in this one, which of course everybody did, I mean, this matchup, looking at it, the over-under was 52.5. Detroit's favored by 3.5. It's looking like this is going to be a back-and-forth battle, high scoring. Well, it was
For one
for
side.
one team,
Yeah.
and it was not the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Dak was 17 for 33 for 178 yards and 2 picks. Also ran the ball once for a yard, giving him 5.2 points. Um, I mean, it was pathetic. I mean, the Lions are typically a team you could throw on, not really run on. They weren't able to do either. He couldn't even eclipse 200 yards. Cooper Rush had to come in. And I mean, that obviously this game got so out of hand. That's why this happened. But Cooper Rush comes in. He's 8 for 11 for 46 yards and another pick. And then one rushing attempt for 2 yards. I mean, he played 26% of the snaps. He played 18 of the offensive snaps.
Yeah.
But the running backs, I mean, you could expect that it wasn't too pretty. Rico Dowdle actually was able to salvage his day from some dump offs, but he ran
Yeah.
the ball 5 times for 25 yards, but you don't get fantasy points for high yards per carry. So,
Yeah.
he also, but like I said, he added 5 catches on 6 targets for 30 yards, giving him 10.5 points. So
Yeah.
it's survivable. I mean, going up against the Lions, if you had to start him this week, number one, if you were expecting a lot, I don't know what Detroit Lions team you've been watching, but if you had any realistic expectations, you knew that it was probably going to be tough. And if he was going to get it done in any way, shape, or form, it was going to have to be either through the form of a touchdown or the passing game.
Yeah.
It happened to be the passing game, and he got over double digits. He only played 28% of the snaps, though. Zeke played 41. After the whole, I don't know if we got a chance to talk about it last week. The whole Zeke talking about he was confused or surprised with his usage, one of the two, and then Jerry Jones came out saying like, "Oh, they're saving him." Well, I don't know exactly what they're saving because he ran the ball 8 times for 17 yards, and that was it.
Yeah.
So he just doesn't look good. I mean, I think whatever he had last year, that was it. Used with the Patriots, and he just looks awful this year. I mean, Rico Dowdle doesn't look like, you know, an all pro or anything, but he looks better than Zeke does out there.
For
It's
sure.
just not pretty. Lipke played 32% of the snaps, but didn't add any actual offensive stats in this one. He was really just blocking.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really all for the running backs. But going into the pass catchers, CD had 14 targets, which you like to see. You would like to see him catch more than 50% of them. Caught 7 of them for 89 yards and also had one rushing attempt for 2, giving him 16.1 points. A lot of people probably flexed or started Jalen Tolbert this week. It looked like a good matchup, so on and so forth. I mean, he didn't dud you necessarily. Caught 4 of his 5 targets for 43 yards, giving you 8.3 points. Not the best, not the worst. He was out there for 93% of the snaps. CD was out there for 71.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevontae Turpin added 4 catches on 7 targets for 24 yards. Also ran the ball 1 time for 6 yards and lost a fumble. 5 points for him. Brandon Aubrey added 12 points. Cowboys defense. Big old goose egg.
I feel like you're forgetting
I,
someone.
who?
Jake.
Oh, man. I did skip right over him. Here he is.
Here he is.
Man, he forgot about himself. No,
Yeah.
I mean, he got 3 catches on 4 targets for 11 yards, 4.1 point. I mean, that one sucked. You'd really expect a lot more from like CD got the 16.1 point game, even in like, the blowout, and he got pulled at a certain point. Obviously, so did Dak. He was still able to put up like the semblance of a decent game.
Yeah.
And Rico Dowdle barely scraped by a double digit, but
You
that
look
was
at
like it.
Jake as the number 2 option, and you see that, and it's like, dude, come on. You're losing by like 40 points too. And you can't do the Lions aren't over there playing hard man press coverage. They're up 40. And you still couldn't do
Yeah,
anything.
Dak Prescott was horrible
Yeah, he was.
in this game.
Yeah, he was.
So I don't know. I mean, Cowboys are going on a bye. Um, I don't know. Their defense has been
They're so injured too.
disgustingly bad. Yeah, and I mean, if they're able to get like at least Micah back, and we'll see what happens. I think they might look better out of the bye. Hopefully, at least they do offensively. If they're not able to fix the defense, I mean,
You know who they play
it,
out of the bye, right?
the Niners.
Mm-hmm. Potentially Christian McCaffrey return.
Yeah, I mean, it could, the way it's looking, be a very good game for him to come back to with that awful defense.
Yeah.
But again, not a good game for the Cowboys.
No.
If you were starting Dak, like me in a couple leagues, then
Pain.
sorry, that
Yeah.
one hurt. The next one, this was a really weird, really weird game.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a defensive battle, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I I mean, I guess, shoulda, coulda, woulda, but it's hard to say that if Malik Neighbors wasn't playing in this game that the Giants wouldn't have won. But the Bengals just weren't able to do as much offensively as you would have liked to see. I mean, we talked about the Giants defense being a real unit, especially their pass rush. They were able to log 4 sacks against Joe Burrow in this one after getting, I think, 7 or 6 last week. But we know what they bring to the table. But still, it was something that I was hoping to. And I mean, we still got some good, not great, good games out of our two pass catchers. I was just hoping for a little more in this one. I mean, the over under was 47, and the Bengals won 17-7. This was just not necessarily the game I was expecting.
Yeah.
Um, Joe Burrow's lone touchdown came on the ground. He was 19 for 28 for 208 yards for rushing attempts for 55 yards. And I mean, it was pretty cool. He peeled off, I think it was the longest rushing attempt for a Cincinnati Bengals quarterback.
Yep.
So, I mean, he put himself in the Bengals history books yet again.
That came
But
early too. Very early.
yeah, no, it did. And that was the weird thing about it was
And it's like
this
that was
game
it.
kind of just lulled on a little bit, I
Yeah.
guess. Um, but he finished with 19.8 points due to his, rushing that he was able to add. Chase Brown got the other touchdown. Funnily enough, I mean, and this one came at the end to kind of put it away 17-7, but it was right after he had fumbled, which luckily for him, the Giants weren't able to recover it.
Yeah.
It got slapped out of bounds, and I think like the very next play he takes it for like a 30-yard touchdown. So,
Yeah.
um, as someone who has Chase Brown in a couple of places, that was pretty cool to see. But he finished 10 attempts for 53 yards and that touchdown. Also caught 2 of his 3 targets for 11 yards, giving him 14.4 points. If you happen to start him this week, then he did well for you.
Yeah.
And I mean, moving forward, I'm willing to keep playing him until I see it move like significantly in the direction of Zach Moss. It's obvious that he's the more talented back. Zach Moss didn't like, kill his chances or anything. Like they paid him, he's going to get work. I mean, this is the first week you saw it flip in the direction of Chase Brown in snap percentage.
Yeah.
Chase Brown played 62%, Zach Moss played 45. Zach Moss, it was weird though because going into the game, Zach Moss did not have an injury designation and Chase Brown was questionable. So it's kind of hard to just chalk it up to, I mean, maybe Zach Moss got like re-injured a little bit and it was worse than they initially thought. He also did fumble in this one and was very inefficient. Carried the ball 6 times for 13 yards and lost a fumble. Caught his lone target for 2 yards. So he finished with zero point 0.5 fantasy points. If you were one of the poor suckers who happened to be starting him, like me, it hurt. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
was one of the reasons why I started him because in Dynasty I have him and Chase Brown. Just going into this game, it was like, okay, if there's goal line work to be had, Chase Brown had the designation going into the game. Zach Moss didn't. It was just one of those things like, okay, I think I'll go with the healthier guy. That didn't seem to be the case. And I think just moving
Yeah.
forward, it might start looking a little more like this. Not zero point 0.5 and 14.4 for the respective players, but the more talented player might end up getting a little more work. So
Yeah.
We'll just keep an eye on and monitor that moving forward. But into the pass catchers, where T. Higgins caught 7 of 7 targets for 77 yards, 14.7 points. That man
Was that
might have been
fun for you to
gambling this
say?
week. It was a little more fun than I thought it would be, to be honest. But it rolled off the tongue
He
well.
kind of won. Like, if you really watched this game, I'm not going to say he won them the game, but every time they needed something, it was T. Higgins in this game. He was
Yeah.
the guy for them in this one.
I mean, for the most part, they did a pretty good job on Jamar Chase. I think not most of, but a large chunk of his yards came on that large. Let me just double check and see how many yards because I don't want to misquote. Yeah, it was 33 of 72 yards came on one play.
Yeah.
That kind of one where Burrow was running around, chucked it up. It was a good play, but I mean, outside of that, pretty much what I was trying to say, they were doing a good job on him. And I mean, they had Burrow under duress most of the night. Like I said, they sacked him 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty tough, but Chase still hauled in 5 of his 6 targets for 72 yards. So 12.2 points for him, which isn't a bad game by any means, but we just hope for a little bit more.
Yeah.
Andre Yoshivas, 2 catches on 3 targets for 36 yards. I think that ship has sailed.
Oh,
I mean, I don't even think he's like a stash. He's just more of
no.
if he's there on the waivers and one of these two guys are to get hurt,
Yep.
you know what kind of value he brings to the table.
Yeah.
Other than that, he's definitely someone that you can drop. And yeah, Eric All was the only tight end that had involvement offensively. He
Mm-hmm.
caught 2 of his 3 targets for 10 yards, giving him 3 points. And Drew Sample still played the most. And then it was Eric All at 43%, Mike Gesicki at 36. McPherson gave you 5, Bengals defense gave you 8. And that was all she wrote for the Bengals on Sunday night. Got
Yeah.
their second win.
Yes, they did. The Giants only mustered up 7 points. They were shorthanded. No Devin Singletary, no Malik Neighbors. We still had some solid fantasy finishes. Daniel Jones was not one of those. He was 22 of 41, didn't throw a touchdown, had an interception, carried it 11 times for 56 yards. It's so weird the rushing upside Daniel Jones offers. Like when you look at him, you see the type of quarterback he looks like. Now he can run the ball. He absolutely can run it. He finished with 12.8. I was expecting a little bit more from him, but again, they were shorthanded. The Bengals defense showed up in this one, and it was rough. Again, with Devin Singletary out, Tyrone Tracy stepped into that role. Wasn't efficient on the ground. Carried it 17 times for 50 yards, but did get in the end zone and caught all 6 of his targets for 57 yards, giving him 22.7. This is another backfield where, they paid Singletary. They brought him in. Singletary hasn't been bad for them so far this season, but he gets banged up. Tyrone Tracy's the rookie.
He's had a little bit of a fumbling issue, if anything.
Yeah, and Tyrone Tracy's taking advantage of the opportunity. Now, if and when Singletary comes back, what this backfield will look like, I'm not sure yet. Tyrone Tracy's obviously a guy you keep on your roster. Should absolutely be on your roster, but is he going to be playing 84% of snaps when Singletary comes back? No. I think he's going to finish, 35 to 45, maybe 50. It might be like a Zach Moss, Chase Brown type of situation where it's going to fluctuate week to week, but they both have a little bit of standalone value. Now, you have to remember, Malik Neighbors was also missing in this one. So some of that volume is going to go to Malik Neighbors from everyone. Everyone's going to take a hit. So we'll just have to see going forward, but Tyrone Tracy has been great. Eric Gray played 18% of snaps, 3 carries for 13 yards, not very involved. Darius Slayton, thank you for continuing My streak parlay was targeted 11 times, catching 6 of them for 57 yards for 11.7. Wandale Robinson, also 11 targets, caught 5 for 50, giving you 10. If you started either one of those guys, I mean, you could hope for a touchdown or a little bit more yardage, but I mean, they both gave you double digits.
I got what I wanted out of Slayton.
For
I
sure.
wasn't putting Slayton in necessarily hoping that he'd win my week. He got the 11 targets. Could he have done more with that? Yes, but the 6 for 57, I mean, it's still Daniel Jones targets, and he's not like, last week. If I could have got last week's numbers, I would have been ecstatic. But 11.7 when he's a spot start, and that's kind of what I'm talking about with Andre Yoshibas, is like Darius Slayton. After this week, Malik Neighbors comes back, I'm going to drop him.
He's gone.
But
Yeah.
if the time around, it's when those times come around where the star player's out and you have a guy that you could just wait till waivers run and no one else picks him up.
Yeah.
That's
No.
a good spot start right there.
Absolutely. And the receiver that just does not seem like he can get any rhythm is Jalen Hyatt. He saw 4 targets, only caught 1 for 6 yards. It's just not there for him. Theo Johnson caught all 3 of his for 30 yards, giving him 6. Greg Joseph, I had to write this because he missed both his field goals and made an extra point. So he had -1 on the day. And the Giants defense gave you 9. They were solid in this one. And our Monday night. And how much more interesting would this Monday night matchup have been if it was happening this coming Monday?
Well, do you not think that this game is a big reason why those two teams went out and made the...
Yes.
I think they both
And
saw in this game that they're like, we both have a chance to win this division.
yeah.
Like, the Dolphins are dead in the water. The Jets have a good defense. The Bills have some players on defense. They got a lot of people hurt, so if they could get people back, but it's like I think the Bills definitely saw the hole in their offense that
Yeah.
needs to be filled. I mean, Khalil Shakir is your number one. It's cute, and it might win you some games against,
It's not going
some
to win
teams.
you the big game. I know what you mean.
It's
It's
not
not
even.
going to.
It's not gonna win you game. I mean, look what happened when they went up against the Ravens.
Yeah.
It's like you can't go into serious matchups like that. You need a heavy hitter.
Yeah. Well, you're
And they
talking
go out
about winning the division, but you only named 3 teams in that division. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, all right. The Bills won this matchup 23-20. It was a close game. It
It'll be a
lived up.
while.
Yeah, it lived up to the hype of this game. I was hoping for 49 points scored in this game. It was 43. Couldn't get another touchdown. So close, but not close enough. Josh Allen got it done in this one. 19 of 25 for 215 yards, threw 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 9 carries for 18 yards and a touchdown, giving him 24.4. A very solid day for him. And just like the Niners did week 1, the Bills waited till Monday to say, James Cook is out. So hopefully, if you were playing him, you pivoted quickly to Ray Davis, and it paid off for you. He had 20 carries for 97 yards, caught all 3 of his targets for 55, giving him 18.2. He played 58% of the snaps. Ty Johnson played 36 and was fairly uninvolved. He was efficient, 4 carries for 34 yards, but that is it, giving him 3.4. Again, James Cook comes back. He's obviously the guy, but if he were to miss another week, Ray Davis has proven, and the Bills, how they go to business running the ball, that he can be a solid play for you. This receiver room was absolutely disgusting. There is no other way to say it. Mac Hollins led them in fantasy points with 1 catch for an 8-yard touchdown. Rumor has it he was barefoot when he did it. Finished with 7.8 fantasy points. Keon Coleman caught 3 of his 4 targets for 26, giving him 5.6. Khalil Shakir returned from injury and is obviously not fully healthy. He only played 38% of snaps. and was only targeted twice, catching both for 19 yards and 3.9. So if you started Shakir thinking he was going to come back and, resume that number one role, it is obvious that he is not fully ready to do so. And
Well, and he won't.
ah,
There's no number one role to come back to because it now belongs to Amari Cooper.
yes, man. Amari with the real quarterback. That's going to be
Yeah.
exciting for our previews. That will be very exciting. But yeah, for Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman fantasy owners that were hoping Keon Coleman would eventually take that step, that door just closed even more, even though it was only cracked open currently. Now it is shut. So yeah, Curtis Samuel caught 3 of his 4 targets for 44, giving him 7.4. The tight ends both got it done. Kincaid on a much higher level, catching 6 of his 7 targets for 51 yards, 11.1. Finally, a Kincaid fantasy performance we can really stand behind. It wasn't 1 catch and a touchdown. It wasn't 3 catches for 40 yards. 6 catches for 51 on 7 targets is a solid day for a tight end. And of course,
He led the team in targets. It was
it was good. It was just good to see. And of course, Dawson Knox sniped the touchdown. His lone target was a 12-yard touchdown, giving him 8.2. Tyler Bass, minus the B at the beginning of his last name, finished with 3 fantasy points. He missed a field goal and took the worst extra point attempt I may have ever seen. And the defense gave you 7 if you happen to start him. The Bills got the win. A lot of the time, when they get wins, it's not always going to be pretty, but they find ways to get it done. Josh Allen continues to be Josh Allen, I guess. I think he'll find
Yeah.
more stability with Amari Cooper incoming.
No, definitely. And it was a divisional game. The Jets always play them tough. Speaking of the Jets and new wide receivers, they got one as well. Devontae Adams
Yep.
has gone to the Jets. So, what this means for the offense of the New York Jets, I am not sure. He plans to play this coming week.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my opinion, you hold your horses and play everything the same way and watch it play out. Because if you try to jump the gun or get too speculative, yes, Garrett Wilson is coming off 2 big games, but if you try to trade him for too much, it's going to look it's going to be hard right now because to everyone it's coming from a place of you're scared of what Garrett Wilson is about to become. Now if you hold on to him for one more week and he has another big week, then you might be able to get out of the Garrett Wilson situation. And I'm not saying it's going to be bad. He's just not leads the NFL in targets currently. That is 100% going to change. We all know that's going to change, and it's the target volume which has kept him alive. Granted, the offense definitely looked better last night,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just something that there's going to be change and not necessarily in the positive direction.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to say everything is going to be good when Devontae Adams is going to essentially be the number one receiver
Yeah.
and the guy that was the league leader in targets. What's going to happen
Yeah.
now. Aside from that, going back to this game that they just played last night, the Jets had so many opportunities to win. Unfortunately, Greg Zuerlein was not able to figure out how to make a field goal in the fourth quarter. Um, that was pretty sad to see.
Yeah.
But and then of course Mike Williams just falls at the end of the game and it ends in an interception for Aaron
And then they
Rodgers.
grab Devontae, and Mike Williams is going to be the odd man out.
Yes, of course. He who knows? He's gonna get traded. But anyway, so Aaron Rodgers was 23 for 35, 294 yards, 2 touchdowns, and that interception, which was not his fault, but still counts on the stat sheet.
Yep.
So 18.8 points for him. Brees Hall, 18 attempts for 113 yards, also caught 5 of his 6 targets for 56 yards, 21.9 points, and he played 87% of the snaps, which was his highest logging of the year.
Yeah.
Obviously, in one where they are fighting tooth and nail, that is not very much of a place for Braylon Allen. Um, I think it makes perfect sense. And it's really hard to say what this offense is going to become, aside from the fact that I think Brees Hall moving forward is going to be great. Another one that performed well that you had been waiting for desperate a lot more, especially with him. The last couple weeks had been putrid. So this was
Yeah.
a huge breath of fresh air. It's funny because he should have had a touchdown had he had just been able to beat Taylor Rapp one on one. But
Okay, you watched it. You saw the play.
yeah,
I genuinely thought Brees was gonna lunge for it. Like it was it like the three. I genuinely thought he was gonna skydive for the touchdown, and I feel like he would have got it.
yeah. I mean, I was surprised
He just slowed up and just kind of
he
got
just
like not even
he couldn't
tackled.
beat him. Yeah, he couldn't beat him in the open field. He just like didn't. I don't know. It was strange,
He just
but
went out of bounds.
yeah. So he would have had a much better night, but 21.9, we will still take that and love it.
Yeah.
Um, especially the last couple of weeks have just been so bad with him.
Mm-hmm.
I have him in a couple of leagues, and this was
Needed.
glorious. But as I mentioned, Braylon Allen didn't have too much involvement, only played 19% of the snaps, similar to week one. 3 attempts, 8 yards, didn't catch either one of his targets, zero point 0.8 points. Alan Lazard had, ooh, obviously, it's going to end up one of the best touchdowns of the year. It's going to be in highlight reels throughout the year. At the end of the first half, keeping the Jets in the game, Alan Lazard caught a Hail Mary from Aaron Rodgers. But he also continued to produce in this game. Caught 6 of his 7 targets for 114 yards. Um, and the Hail Mary was 52 yards. So I mean, as you can see, he still got production outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
62 yards, in fact.
You want to hear a crazy stat about Alan Lazard? You know what?
Yes.
What's Alan Lazard's rank, wide receiver rank on the season?
I don't know, 14.
11.
Uh,
That's insane. Alan Lazard has been, and obviously
it
now everything is going to change. But
Everything's going to change, yeah. But it is crazy until you think about how down touchdowns have been. And then when you think about that, and then we go to, all right, so let's look at the season. Let's go to Alan Lazard. He has 5 receiving touchdowns.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's the third of his points right there is just from touchdowns. So as we talk, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just one of those things. It's like, yes, he is a reliable receiver for Rodgers. Yes, he's getting those targets. The Hail Mary was crazy, but it's like, those are things. It's just come the end of the season. I mean, especially now, everything's different.
It's not going to be
Had
a
this not
sticky stat.
happened, yeah, then Lazard would have been someone to really talk about. Now it's going to be difficult, but as a possibly send off for a final usable game for Alan Lazard, this was a good one.
For sure.
23.4 points for him. And then Garrett Wilson, like I said, 10 targets, caught 8 of them for 107 and a touchdown, 24.7 points out of him. And I mean, all being said, when we have the Jets, unable to really get anything going, and they had their best first quarter since 2022, I think. But that doesn't often happen, and they start behind a lot. So, I mean, if it gets like that and Rodgers has to continue throwing the ball 35, 36 times a game, it definitely does open up the possibility for Devontae and Garrett Wilson to get double-digit targets a game. We're going to be talking about it a lot more later, but
Yeah.
it's just really something to think about right now.
For sure.
But yeah, Garrett Wilson finished with 24.7. Mike Williams got 3 targets, didn't catch a single one. Tyler Conklin did not follow up on last week's big performance, caught 2 of his 3 targets for 10 yards, 3 points for him. Ruckert also caught Jeremy Ruckert, another tight end, caught 2 of his 3 targets for 7 yards, so 2.7. Greg Zerline finished with 6 points, and the Jets defense finished with 3. And that, my friends, will do it for week 6.
Gosh. We're starting to get
So,
deep. We're starting to get deep into the fantasy season. We've talked about fab. If you have a bunch of fab, it's starting to get time to start using it. Like, there's no point in finishing the season with 200 fab or whatever it is. Make sure you're using it. Use your waiver priorities. Take your shots. We're starting, we're coming up on halfway through the fantasy season. Start making moves. Don't just settle if you're struggling. Don't just settle for what you have and just keep riding it until you're 2-7 or something like that. Try for something.
no, yeah, definitely. And we'll talk about a lot more. I mean, I think with our waiver episode, we'll talk a little bit more about the news and whatnot, and
Yeah.
just some moves that we think are possible to make. We'll go a little more in depth on it. But that'll do it for this one. And as we say every time, thank you guys for the support. Thank you for watching. It has been quite a crazy season so far.
God.
I don't expect it to get any more normal beyond this point. So strap in, everyone. It's going to get crazy from here on out. And hopefully, you're here with us taking more reps with the first team.
Yes, sir.
Adios, folks.